if they expect me to walk away from Luton with nothing, I'll make very sure there's nothing to walk away from.
Hello and welcome to the Oak Road Hatter podcast. I'm Billy Mully, today joined by Finley Cannon, following what was an epic week of Premier League football for Town. We competed very, very well, but at the end of the day it was 2 defeats. The second one coming yesterday as Man City walked away with a 2-1 victory. Finn, how are you getting on?
Yeah, I'm good. It's a strange week to come from being disappointed from losing against Arsenal and Man City. So it's it's a good time to be a Luton fan, but at the same time, it's a real strange feeling.
It is a really strange feeling because I think going into both games, there was, an expectation that we could be turned over. These are 2 of the best teams in the world we're talking about. But also we went into both games with a glimmer of hope. I think we've seen enough this season as well to warrant that, to go into these games actually believing that we can upset the Giants. And, in both games, there was times where we were leading in both games. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be. We'll start at the very start, Finn, with a little bit of too good, too bad. Of course, too good, too bad, our section where we ask you, the supporters, to get in contact, to show us maybe some bits that we missed, some bits that you consider to be the positives and negatives from the game. Starting with Fraser Clark on Twitter. His first good element was we were 1-0 up against one of the world's leading and most expensive teams with 30 minutes to go. It was very, very tense. That sort of second 45 minutes seemed to go on a very, very long time. And his second element that was good, 11 man of the matches who showed great team spirit as ever, never giving up. We'll go on to the 2 bad elements. Nakamba is out for Bournemouth. Of course, Nakamba picked up his 5th yellow card of the season, meaning that he will miss the game at Bournemouth on Saturday. And the second bad element, even the smallest of errors got punished, but we are in the Premier League here, which, I guess he answers it within his own point there. Being in the Premier League, there's such a small margin for error, and I think we're seeing that every mistake at the moment seems to be getting punished. I think both goals they're preventable. A couple of defensive errors in there, Finn, but I think it's all part of the adjustment process to the Premier League, making these mistakes and then being punished. But it does seem that we are on the wrong end of that quite often.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, against Man City, you always expect any sort of minor lapse in judgment or slight mistake, they'll punish it. They can beat probably any team in world football at the moment. On their day, they're pretty unstoppable. So for us to really hold our own against them as well and go 1-up in the first place was more impressive than anything, and really just show what we're all about and what the club's about. And the celebrations as well. I don't think you'll see that from many grounds you go to when a team goes 1-0 up, just celebrated like it's a winning goal late on. And that's every week at Luton as well. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Any small lapse in judgment or mistake is definitely going to be punished in the Premier League. It's just the way the division is. You don't have that time on the ball that you might get in the Championship.
And I think for me as well, when looking at some of the mistakes that have been made, I sort of I think Luton fans are caught in two minds. When you see the mistakes in isolation, if you just watch the highlights, for example, it looks I think a lot worse. But I think when you consider how organised, how structured we are for 90 minutes, I don't know. I sort of accept that there's going to be some mistakes within that because we are so organised. We're so keen on detail from a defensive standpoint that naturally these mistakes are going to happen. I don't know if you're the same.
No, I agree. And like I mentioned before, that when you've constantly got that pressure coming at you again and again and again, and you're having to remain so defensively resolute constantly, there's always going to be that lapse in judgment. You can't stay 100% focused for all that time, plus the time that's added on when you're sat behind the ball, desperately trying to stay on these players that are, in City's case, moving around constantly all over the pitch. They've got such a fluid attack. So it is really a difficult one to, I guess, judge against.
We'll move on to the second one of the day. We've got LTFC Dave with his good parts being Barkley again, and didn't disgrace ourselves versus the best side in Europe. Bad, ultimately nothing to show for a good display, which is something that we can say on multiple occasions this season. And I guess it brings up the point that we are putting in very good performances without getting anything out of them. Um, either how long can that continue? Surely good performances will get rewarded in the sort of the near future, but also we're not taking advantage of our good performances, if that makes sense. And sorry, his second bad element, fairly sloppy goals to concede again, which we sort of touched on the defensive errors. Move on to Paul Wright. Good was the team performance generally, which I think we can both agree on. And as it seems to be every week, Barkley's name is mentioned as Paul's second one. Bad, Nakamba's booking, and then VAR, which is quite a debatable one because I think being in the ground, um, I think it's only natural that when you're in the ground, you tend to think the ref's against you. Both goals from where I was sat looked like they could be VAR checks, but I think watching them both back, I agree. Both goals definitely should have stood. But I think it's more the Premier League smartness from Manchester City winning those fouls, and we're an aggressive team, and I think sometimes in the Championship you get away with a bit of over aggression. We're not really getting away with it in the Premier League, and players like Jack Grealish, Bernardo Silva, Phil Foden are very intelligent. They know when contact comes to go down, and it always seems to be free kicks, which I think it's a little bit of cuteness and learning the Premier League culture, and something that it's frustrating for us fans to see, but at the same time it's just part of how the Premier League runs. Last one from Mad Hatter. He says that his phone exploded when Luton went one up, and that we went toe to toe with the world champions, the champions of Europe. Probably no real debate that they are the best team in Europe. I know they haven't fully been firing over the last few weeks, but I think we can agree that they are an unbelievable team and probably the best in the world. In terms of his two bad elements, we need less punchy, more box focus, but doing well. And the second bad element, not getting a draw at best, I think, again, goes to the point we made about putting in a decent performances and not getting rewarded for it. We'll go on to our own analysis of the game, Finn, and then looking at the start, looking at the team that Rob Edwards sent out to battle. No Ogbene, no Osho in the squad, and it just is so disappointing that every week there just seems to be a couple of new injury concerns to key individuals. You think of how impressive Osho has been of late, getting over his injury and putting in real solid performances in that back three. Ogbene has been sensational for us as well. Just really disappointing that it seems to be unachievable, getting a full squad together, and Rob Edwards having, those real difficult dilemmas.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's when you, I guess it's from the pressure of constantly defending and chasing the ball, you're going to get those injuries from just overworking yourself. Whereas we're not playing as many games as we were playing in the Championship, and for most of our players, they were playing in the Championship or League One last season. But the intensity of the games is probably much higher in the Premier League, so you're really just having to stay constantly alert and constantly moving when you're, especially with the lack of possession we have. Um, but yeah, it's really frustrating when you get two players back and then you lose another one, or you get one player back and then you get two players pick up a knock in the game and go off, and it just feels like it's never ending. But I guess it's not just Luton at the moment that are having those problems. You look around the league, there's teams all over the league that are absolutely riddled with injuries. Look at the team Newcastle are putting out. They can't make any changes because all of the players they've got are the players they have available, plus a couple on the bench, and they're having to bring in young players. The same with Tottenham losing Madison, Van der Ven at the same time. And just all over the league, it's pretty relentless at the moment. The injuries are really stacking up. So, whilst it is really, really frustrating as a Luton fan to lose these players, we can't just blame results on injuries, and we have to look at what we've got in front of us and the team we've got available to us. And I think all the players that came in on Sunday for the game they played well as well. The players that haven't had so many opportunities in recent weeks, the likes of Ryan Giles, really did put in a shift and gave everything for the shirt, which is all you can hope for and all you can expect as a Luton fan.
And I think what you mentioned there, squad depth this season is really impressive, considering we're playing at a higher level, considering we didn't, spend as much as teams that are around us spend as much as any team in this division. To have real competition for places, even when injuries are a real concern, has to be seen as a positive. And you know, you think of the back line, that's probably the best example where we have been sort of riddled with injuries. You think of Osho, Burke, Anderson just getting back to fitness. Lockyer, hasn't had a clean run. Bell had his time on the sidelines. You go through all of them, bar Mengi, who even Mengi might have had a spell on the sidelines as well. But it's been very difficult to get a settled back line, and I know there have been defensive errors, but I think largely you can look at every defender and say they've done a reasonable job in that back line, considering the upped quality in the Premier League. We'll go on to the game itself, and I don't know about you, Finn, but I thought we were in for a very, very long afternoon when Phil Foden had that opportunity. Sorry, Andros Townsend spoke about it today on Talksport, how they pressed and pressed well, but Manchester City still managed to play out from the press, create a chance, and he said that right from that very moment he thought it was going to be a very long afternoon, but I guess it didn't turn out that way. But what were your thoughts after an opening 5 minutes where we didn't really see much of the ball and had to do a lot of chasing?
I mean, ahead of the game, most of us knew we wouldn't see much of the ball. I think any team that plays Man City, bar a couple of teams, really doesn't expect to see much of the ball, and we haven't had much of the ball in a lot of the games we've played. So I guess we were prepared for it, but you did see how, I guess, efficient they are with it as soon as the game started, moving the ball around every single player, constantly keeping it moving and having the Luton players having to follow them all around the pitch. And it is just, yeah, it is relentless passing, and they do tend to pass teams to death, and that's really what they do under Pep. Um, and when Foden went in with that opportunity early on, it was a real, I mean, it was a bit of a worry. And then when he didn't score it as well, I mean, that was the relief that I felt, and I felt that lifted the crowd really as well. I think they really needed that because, as I mentioned previously, it was a slightly odd atmosphere ahead of the game. Everyone was very excited about the game, but it didn't really reflect what we had against Arsenal, where it was really relentless from the stands as well. So it did need something to really lift the crowd up, and I think that really did help, to be honest. But yeah, especially but looking at the Man City team ahead of the game, even with no Haaland in it, you looked at that team and you thought this is a really, really good team, and that's what everyone expected as well. When you've got a World Cup winner up front and Julian Alvarez, and he's not even their first choice striker, I mean, it says everything. And then £100 million Jack Grealish playing as well, when our most expensive player is Giles and Chong at 5 million.
just speaks volumes, don't it, of the disparities for just throughout this division. I think going back to that point I made at the start, where we sort of pressed as effectively as we could, and they still played it round us. There wasn't too many opportunities that they managed to carve out from that throughout the rest of the game. I can't really think of many chances where they played right through us. I think from that point we pressed very, very effectively, choosing the right moments to go, choosing the right moments to stay. I think someone like Andros Townsend is massively key for that, and I think you can see him calling triggers so often. It's usually him that calls it, Adebayo as well. But we've grown this reputation, I think, at the start of the season, but by being, I say start of the season, but you probably go beyond that. You probably go into the majority of years that we're under Nathan Jones's stewardship. But out of possession, we're very effective. And yesterday is probably the biggest test that we'll ever face in terms of questions a team asks of you out of possession. And I think for the most part, you have to say that we passed that test with flying colours.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think out of possession we have been pretty good all season. It's occasional lapse, as we previously mentioned, but yeah, against Man City, you're not going to have much of the ball, and we really did well compared to the way a lot of other teams in our position have done against Man City in the past. Out of possession, you get run around ragged, but Luton are happy not having possession, and we've been like it for years. Even when we were competing in the Championship, we didn't really want the ball that much. We were happy to sit back and wait for teams to come to us. So I guess it's sort of not the perfect way for us to be playing, but against Man City, we knew we wouldn't have much of the ball, so we were ready for what was coming at us. Yeah, and also as you mentioned before, Townsend triggering that press. You can see it every time he started. He's been the one to just make that first move, and everyone follows with him. It's not just one player pressing on their own; it's a group pressing, the front three pressing together and pinning players into corners. Just the problem against Man City when you've got all 11 players on the pitch that can play a pass anywhere on the pitch as well. When you've got Edison pinging balls all over the place, it's a really difficult one to counter.
Usually, and this probably applies to all levels, but there'll be one player or a certain pattern or sort of a certain area of the ball where Rob Edwards would be saying, okay, when so and so receives the ball on their right foot, that's when we go. But you just can't, with City, you just can't find a single player that might be prone to giving the ball away, or in every position, world class technical ability. And I think that's what makes us as Luton fans proud with what we saw yesterday, is that we appreciate how good of a team Manchester City are. We've seen them on the TV for years completely dominate the best of the best. And then, we caused as many problems as many of the top teams do against them. So I think that's one element of the performance that we can be really, really proud of. Something else that we could be really proud of was that first goal. Elijah Adebayo scoring right on half time. I said to you before we start recording, we've had a lot of positivity and joy over the last, however many years. You think back to Wembley, you think about getting to Wembley, just our general rise. But that Adebayo goal was the most I've celebrated a goal in I don't know, probably ever. It was a little bit of the unexpectedness that probably caught me by surprise, but also the magnitude of the goal, the timing of it. Everything was just perfect with that, and we went into the break leading the current champions. That was a special moment.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was really quite amazing as well. And I think for anyone who wasn't at the game, whilst we were at the game, it was absolutely amazing to be at the stadium watching it. Even looking on social media, you could see people going absolutely crazy. They were just in disbelief that Luton had gone 1-0 up against Man City. But the goal itself was absolutely brilliant. The way Ross Barkley beat, was it 4 men in midfield? 4 of the best players in world football in midfield, skinned them as if they weren't there, including Rodri. Um, Brought the ball out wide to Doherty, who then found Townsend, and that cross from Townsend could not have been better placed. And then Adebayo against Diaz, he just rose, and it was like no one was there to compete with him. He was never going to lose that header. But yeah, as you mentioned, the way we celebrated that inside the stadium, the whole stadium just went absolutely crazy. And I think the timing of that really helped with a lot of people had been getting up to go in for their half-time pint or hot drink or food. So there were people all in the gangways as well. So they weren't just sat down in their seat waiting to celebrate. There were people absolutely everywhere celebrating, just going absolutely crazy. And I just think that added to the celebrations at that moment.
And what's beautiful about it as well, it wasn't just in the ground that people were celebrating. It wasn't even just Luton fans celebrating. We had, the teams competing for the title. We had probably Arsenal fans, Villa fans after recent weeks, Spurs fans, all supporting us and wanting us to get a result. So I think that was probably a moment as well where down the pubs in Liverpool, in London, wherever it was a goal that was probably widely celebrated. Went into half time 1-0, and you still, with Manchester City, you cannot rest. You can't have time to reflect, no real breathing space. And I guess for the first 15 minutes, we defended well. And then two moments where concentration lapsed a little bit, and we offered them not just a way back into the game, but we offered them the opportunity to go ahead, and they took them both. As much as we speak about Manchester City's quality, they weren't the best goals in the world. You do have to blame defensive errors as to why we let them back in the game and let them ahead. What did you make of the goals, and I guess what did you make of how it dampened the atmosphere?
So you knew that going into half time, Pep would fire a rocket up them. He would not be having them be 1-0 down against Luton for long. And we knew we'd be in for a lot of pressure in the second half from the off. And that was always going to be the case. And it's exactly what happened. The first goal, whilst it wasn't, the actual build up was not the best from Luton, the finish itself from Bernardo Silva was absolutely brilliant. The way he curled it into the bottom corner and beat in Kaminsky. I mean, there's not many players was it on his weak foot as well? I can't remember if it was on his weak foot or not. He took it with his left foot, but he curled it properly. There was a few players in the box to curl it round as well. So the quality of that goal, the actual finish was really good. But yeah, the build-up was quite frustrating, not being able to get the ball away once again. And then the second goal, it came from obviously a Bell mistake. And as much as I love Amari Bell, he really did struggle in that moment.
Yeah, I think there has been a few moments with Amari Bell that he's struggled. I think large parts of the game he performed really well. He brought the ball out very well. But yeah, that was a moment where he did really struggle. I just want to go through a couple of player performances, and typically this is where I mention the name Ross Barkley, but I think we'll leave that later because we got a poll come in that speaks about Barkley a little bit more. But one player I wanted to highlight, Ryan Giles. Somewhat of a surprise inclusion for some, but I guess with knowing Kabore was out, there was always a fairly high chance that he'd start this game. But for a player who's evidently been low on confidence in sort of his early Luton Town career, it was good to see him play and return a decent performance against, as we keep mentioning, the best team in the world.
Yeah, I thought he looked good. I did think he looked really composed in possession. He knew when to press and he knew when to hold off as well on the man who was marking wherever they were on the pitch. And he did follow that player across the pitch every single time. But yeah, it was when he was in the build-up play as well, when we were trying to bring the ball out of defence, he was really linking up well on that left-hand side and making sure he was an option and moving the ball quickly. He didn't look like he'd not been playing much at all. He looked really up to speed, and I think that's a credit to both him and to Rob Edwards for making sure he was really ready to be playing as well. And people have criticised him in quite large parts when he has played on the few occasions, but I think he deserved all the praise he got in that game.
Yeah, it was a weird one for me because I agree with you. I think defensively, and there was a lot of questions about him defensively in the early stages of the season. I think defensively and in possession in the build-up, he was really good, and it was great to see. Obviously, a player who I mentioned before was low on confidence. I still think what the key reason we signed him was the delivery, the ability he can bring in the final third. And I still think that's lacking. And I think that was evidence in a couple of occasions yesterday. But it was great to see him return a good performance, and that will no doubt do wonders for his confidence, and hopefully we start get to really see the best of Ryan Giles. He started the season off, had those difficulties, and really hadn't had too much of an opportunity since then to prove himself. But I think that playing against Man City, regardless of who you are, it's going to be a tough game. And I think for him to return a display like that has to be seen as a massive positive. Another player I want to mention, Jacob Brown. Again, he's had a similar kind of thing. I think he started the season really well, and then had a little bit of dip in form, struggled in front of goal. But I think the last few games he's been absolutely fantastic, and I do not see many players give Kyle Walker a difficult game. But Jacob Brown, through all of his athleticism and cuteness on the ball as well, which I hadn't really seen too much of him, he was a lot more effective in possession, and I thought it was a really, really good display from him. And I'm very, very excited when it comes to our attacking options. You think when Ogbene's back fit, Brown playing at a very high level at the moment, Chong as well off the bench has been really good in some games. But yeah, just circling back to Jacob Brown, how would you assess his performance?
Yeah, I did think he played really well, especially defensively as well, which is obviously probably not what people expect from him. He was really putting in a shift again and keeping up with Walker every time Walker came forward, which keeping up with Kyle Walker is not easy for anyone. So I think he did well. He did have a slight moment where he could have got a red card, where he did go slightly two-footed into a tackle, and that was a bit worrying. And I did think maybe he'd get subbed at that point, just to make sure that the ref didn't get an opportunity to give him that yellow card or that red card at another opportunity. But generally, I think he did play really well, and he has done in recent weeks. He's popped up with a couple of goals when it's really mattered, or when we've really needed someone to come into the game and score. And then you mentioned earlier in the season when he wasn't really in form, he was still putting in a shift. I don't think anyone can criticise the way he's been playing and how hard he works. It was just, in front of goal, he was just missing the target every so often, especially with some headers as well in some big moments. He really could have scored a couple of headers against different teams. So maybe if that's something he needs to work on, so be it. But yeah, going forward, he really offers something, and every player we've got in that front line offers something different. So we can really bring in a variety of players to, I guess, test the opposition we're playing against, and we can make those changes so they're constantly on their toes and having to defend against different options.
We'll head into a short break, but when we're back, we'll go through the free polls of the week. We are back for part 2 of today's episode following Luton's 2-1 defeat to Manchester City. It's a result that leaves the Hatters 9 points from 16 games, but far more optimistic than that, us Luton fans, because what we've seen we can have a lot of positivity about. We're going to head into the polls, and the first one we've put out today was, what is the priority position ahead of the opening of the January transfer window? And before I read out the poll results, Finn, the three options we had was a striker, a right wing back, centre back, or other. What would you have gone for? What do you believe would be the priority with January in mind?
I think the priority there is still striker. We have got the depth at centre back in my mind. Whilst we have been getting a lot of injuries, we do have those options to bring in, rotate through. This right wing back, I guess Kabore has been played well recently as well. When he's played, he's done well. And then Doherty can play that side, and we've got options there. It is just that striker position. We need someone who's going to consistently finish the chances that we're getting, and whether that is Adebayo at the moment or not. I think that's, for me, that's where we need to improve and find someone who's maybe not going to be involved in the build-up play, but will just put the ball in the back of the net when they need to.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'll go through the results. Striker won the poll with 44%. We had 21% at right wing back and 33% at centre back. And I do share what you're saying about the centre back position, where you look at it and you look at I guess the options that are available, and you would perhaps suggest that we could do with adding another centre back, but then you consider the injury list, the proximity of those that are currently injured to returning. And I think we are well stacked. I think it is something that's been echoed and something we haven't really been managed to fulfill last few windows. But a left-sided, left-footed central defender, they're like gold dust. They're very, very difficult to find, and especially when you're applying it to the context of being Premier League ready. I think naturally being a left-footed centre back ups your value. And I think that's something a lot of clubs have found in the Premier League. It's been quite difficult to fill that. But ultimately, I wouldn't say that's the priority. I think we've got enough numbers. I think we've got seven players that can play at centre back, and that's before you even consider Dan Potts, who can also operate there. So definitely a position that I could see us bolstering, but at the same time, I don't think it's the priority. I think a striker that provides a different kind of service to Adebayo or Morris would be ideal. We're a team that see a lot of joy on the counter attack, and I know a lot of that comes through fast and dynamic play down the wings, but perhaps somebody a little bit more mobile, a little bit quicker, that can play centrally might be the point of focus. Maybe somebody that drops deeper to link the play. I'm not too sure in terms of profile, but I think, yeah, I'd have to agree with the eventual outcome of the poll. Striker has to win it for me. Again, a right wing back I could see happening, a permanent option, a permanent right wing back. But yeah, I think that the difficulty in the January transfer window is often price. So I can't see us making too many permanent additions if we do go that way. It's going to be a crazy month to see what happens, to see what kind of fees we are that we eventually pay out. I imagine, and I think most Luton fans imagine, it's not going to be too hefty of a month on the financial side of things, but there are positions to be strengthened. I think that's probably the main message from that. So to run through that poll again, we had 44% thinking that the striker position is the priority. We had 21% right wing back. Centre back was 33%. 2% went for other. Now, we mentioned before that we weren't going to mention too much about Ross Barkley because we've got a poll about him. That poll was, does Ross Barkley have a genuine chance of making England's squad for Euro 2024? And I'll come to you first, Finn, before I reveal the outcome of the poll. Do you think Ross Barkley has a chance?
I mean, I don't see why he shouldn't have a chance with some of the other players being called up in central midfield. Whether he does get picked or not is a different question. Whether Southgate is actually paying attention to Ross Barkley at Luton, that's another question. I think with the way he's playing and the way he controls the games in that position, it's something that England are crying out for, is someone to play next to Declan Rice and really dictate play. And I think it's a no-brainer for me to pick him for England, get him in that midfield, let him play slightly deeper than he's played for England in the past, and really let him do what he's been doing for Luton. And I guess he'd give more time on the ball for England, and he'd have players in positions that are going to score the goals and going to score the chances he's creating as well. So I think he could really flourish in an England team, especially when, yeah, as I mentioned before, you've got Declan Rice next to you. He's used to having one other player next to him with Nakamba or Lokonga or Pelly. So I think he could flourish, and I think he should be in there over the likes of Jordan Henderson playing out in Saudi Arabia, or Calvin Phillips, who can't get in the team at Man City. And I don't think we'll ever get in the team at Man City under Pep. He just doesn't seem to be his sort of player for whatever reason. So surely you want someone who's playing regular football, playing very well, and playing week in, week out. So whether that's Ross Barkley or someone else, for me, it feels like a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's very close, by the way, the poll here. We had 49% yes, 51% no. Very, very close. Very hard to split it there. Yeah, I'm probably like the poll, a little bit on the fence. I think what Ross Barkley offers fantastic service. And you think, what, Euros is still 6 months away at this time, 6-7 months away. I think that the scope for him to continue to develop at Luton is massive. I don't think we're seeing the very best of him, which is, a frightening prospect. The fact that he's probably got an even higher ceiling to hit. But then I do think of there's a number of players that you'd probably have ahead of him. Not saying because of the standard, but you just think of players that have been receiving England call-ups before. Jordan Henderson, you mentioned there, Calvin Phillips, two players that, if form was going to dictate who would go, it would be Barkley. But we know with Southgate, he's created this group of players. You probably throw Harry Maguire in there as well, that not necessarily always performing at club level, but he trusts them. And if a manager trusts you, you got to back that. You got to understand why. But yeah, I think Ross Barkley, I think he's got a very good chance. I do. I think he's got a very good chance to continue proving himself at Luton. The fact that he's, almost single-handedly revolutionised how we build up attacks. You think of what he did in the build up to the Liverpool goal, the build up in the Man City goal. How he's performed against the very best has to be an indication that he can do it against the biggest teams on the world stage as well. It's a bit of a cop out answer. It's a bit of an on the fence answer, because I genuinely think he can, but at the same time, there's 7 months left to go. If he continues progressing in the way he does, I think that Gareth Southgate has to take notice. And if Gareth Southgate starts turning up at Kenilworth Road, I don't think it's just going to be Ross Barkley he'll be looking at. I think Alfie Doughty too might have somewhat of a chance, given the left back situation within England. And then could we be talking about two Luton players representing England? That'd be unbelievable, and probably a sign that we'd done well during the second half of the season. So yeah, let's hope that we're talking about two Luton players going to the World Cup, the Euros representing England.
But we don't want them grabbing the headlines too much, because then people might come in for them. So it's a real balancing act. Can they play really well and get into that squad without every team in the Premier League deciding, oh, we really would quite like an attacking left back, and then come in for Alfie Doughty, because he's going to be one of the harder players to hold on to anyway. So it's a real balancing act. But yeah, I agree with you completely there.
Yeah. And I mentioned sort of the England left back situation. You probably apply that to the left back situation within the top 6 clubs as well. There's not too many performing at the highest level. You think of Manchester United, Luke Shaw, decent, but someone like Alfie Doughty, younger, a bit more attacking, a bit more dynamic. You think of other clubs as well. Arsenal with Zinchenko sometimes playing in midfield. The potential there. You look at a lot of the top clubs like Chelsea as well. They played Chilwell left mid. They've played Colwill at left back a few times as well. So it's not a nailed on position for them.
But even the likes of Man City.
Sorry?
Man City play centre-backs at left-back all the
Yeah.
time, because they don't have that specific left-back. I mean, the centre-backs they play at left-back can do an unbelievable job there, but
yeah,
I mean, it's a far cry. But you could see an Alfie Doughty absolutely thriving in a team where they have so much possession and is just constantly allowed to get forward. And imagine him whipping crosses into Erling Haaland.
a frightening prospect. A very frightening prospect. Let's move on to poll 3. How many points do you expect to pick up in the last 4 games of 2023? And to run through those games, it's Bournemouth away, Newcastle at home, then Sheffield United away on Boxing Day, and then we finish 2023 with the visit of Chelsea. 12 points to potentially be taken in those 4 games. But what do you think, Finn? What do you think?
I mean, realistically, I think we need to get probably 9 points from those games, in terms of staying competitive and staying in a position where we can get out of the relegation zone. That's what we really need. But with Sheffield United have also seemed to have turned a corner under Dean Smith. So whether we can get a win there, I'd like to think we can, but I think that could be when we end up drawing. Bournemouth have really turned a corner recently. They've just beaten Man United, put 3 past Man United. So I don't know. It's a difficult one. I think realistically we'll get 6 points from those games, but we need more. I think, in my opinion, the home games are going to be massive. It's a really good time to be playing Chelsea and Newcastle. I would say Newcastle absolutely torn apart by injuries, and then Chelsea looking so inconsistent. So I think that right now could not be a better time to be playing them.
Yeah, I completely agree. So the 4 answers we gave out were 0 to 2 points, which 8% went for. 3 to 6 points, which where the vast majority went, that was 66%. And then 7 to 9, we had at 21%. 10 plus was 5%. And yeah, you look at the situation as it is. Bournemouth have performed really well of late, but by no means are world beaters. And I think given the week we've just had, we can go into that game with confidence, not necessarily saying we're favourites and we should go and win that game, but I think that we'll have a lot more confidence than if we were battered by both Arsenal and Man City. You look at Newcastle, yeah, a very, very good time to play them. I think they've only won once away from home all season. I don't know how accurate that is, but I know they've definitely had their troubles away from home. And as we alluded to earlier, they've got a real deep injury crisis at the moment. Boxing Day at Sheffield United, yeah, I think they've turned somewhat of a corner under Wilder, but I don't necessarily think that they've gone to a whole higher level because of it. I think probably new manager bounce has settled in. I still think that we are the better side. And I do think that we can go there with confidence that we can take all 3 points. And then Chelsea, very, very inconsistent. And I think we feel a little bit hard done by that we haven't picked up a win against any of the sort of traditional top 6 or the traditional big sides after performing really, really well. So I think that's a great opportunity to, cap off playing some of the biggest sides in the Premier League and actually genuinely getting something. So, I look at that game and think we can do that. I think if I was voting, I would have gone 7 to 9. I think I would have taken somewhat of an optimistic stance. I think seven's very achievable, and you don't look at those games and you're not particularly frightened by them. And I think the fact that we competed so well against Arsenal and City makes me look at the fixture list with a different set of eyes. But yeah, I guess when it all comes to it, if we struggle to beat Bournemouth, then the whole complexion changes. So yeah, I would have gone 7 to 9, but I also very close to going 3 to 6. It's going to be really interesting to see how we end this calendar year, because going into the new year, if we're say 6-7 points behind the relegation pack, then it's going to be very difficult for us to get ourselves to claw ourselves back in contention of staying up. But ultimately, it's a good opportunity to claw back some of those points. So yeah, all to play for. A very busy festive period coming up, and then into the new year as well. I think Burnley away is the first one. So again, you have to consider that a winnable fixture, a fixture that we can deal a blow to their survival hopes, and that they could do the same to us. So a massive game in the complex of things. Finn, in terms of the games that we mentioned there, what one are you looking forward to the most?
I think in terms of the teams coming to Kenilworth Road, for me it's Newcastle. We've seen all the other. Once we get to Newcastle, we'll have seen all the other teams come to, or all the other teams will have either played them home or away, bar Sheffield United at that point. And I think they're the last of the really big sides to come to Kenilworth Road, or for us to go to them. So yeah, seeing them come to us. I mean, Graham Jones will be back at Kenilworth Road. He'll be in the Newcastle coaching staff. and hopefully their fans bring some noise to the away end, which in the Premier League we've not really seen in that many teams coming into the away end. It's been quite subdued, but generally they seem to have good noise anywhere they go. So, but I think it's a good time to play them, and I'm quite excited about playing Chelsea and Newcastle, and I actually think we could get results against both of them. I don't think it's that far-fetched to say that's possibilities at the moment.
I'd definitely be in agreement there. I cannot wait for Newcastle to come to Kenilworth Road, not only because they are a respected and a good set of fans, but you look at that game and the difficulties they've had on the road, and you genuinely believe that we can get something, or not even something. We genuinely look at that game and think, Rob Edwards will be targeting that as a winnable fixture. Which, at the start of the season, would we be looking at that game and thinking that? Who knows? But that is it for today. Big thank you, Finn, for coming on, and a big thank you to everybody watching and listening back home. We'll be back during the week with a Bournemouth preview, and then it all gets a little bit crazy as the festive period begins and the games come thick and fast, as we know. We'll keep you posted when we do intend to upload. But until next time, it is goodbye from us.